In Massachusetts, many issues are overseen by local governments. Policies addressing housing, policing, schools, and public health are at least partially set at the local level. And if you are advocating for change in those areas, it is likely that you will need to work with local officials. This video will lay out the way Needham's government is organized and will point you toward who you should interact with to make changes in those policies and their implementation. We will end with a video with Fernanda Pinto describing how she, as a high school student, affected change in one Needham policy. The town of Needham's executive body is the Select Board. It consists of 5 members elected for 3 years with overlapping terms and has supervision over all matters that are not specifically delegated to some other officer or board. It's a good place to start if you are unsure of what body is responsible for a particular issue. The Select Board, which meets every 2 weeks, often begins its meetings with a short period listening to town residents who wish to bring issues to the board. Select Board members are accessible and interested in hearing about issues of concern. The best way to connect is to email them at selectboard@needhamma.gov or to call the number listed on their website. The Select Board appoints the town manager, who serves as the chief executive officer of the town and is responsible for day-to-day administration. Her office is also a good place to start if you need clarity on who is responsible for certain issues or how to proceed. Besides the Select Board, the town has 9 other elected boards and many more appointed boards that have more specific responsibilities. For example, the Planning Board is responsible for the town's growth and development through zoning bylaws. Information on contacting these boards is on the town website. Several other boards are appointed to address specific areas and could be contacted on your issue. For example, the Community Preservation Committee recommends funding for special projects, like acquiring open space or funding affordable housing, and the Conservation Commission is charged with protecting the town's conservation lands. Needham's legislative body is its town meeting, made up of 240 elected town meeting members plus members at large. It meets each May and usually in the fall. It approves the annual town budget and other funding and amends town bylaws. It also votes on citizens' petitions and resolutions, which can be proposed by 10 or more Needham voters. These may be to change a bylaw, to resolve to take an action, or simply to state the will of town meeting. For example, a recently passed citizens' petition declared a climate emergency. The issues to be addressed are listed in the town meeting warrant, which is posted on the town website. The public may attend and speak. These meetings are shown on TV and posted for future viewing. You may want to reach out to non-governmental groups in town that advocate for specific issues. Generally, their contact information is available on their websites. For example, a few years ago, a student worked with Green Needham to propose a plastic bag ban. And now we'll be hearing from Fernanda Pinto.
Hi everyone, my name is Fernanda Pinto and I am a senior at Needham High School right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with kind of making change and specifically about changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day within the Needham Public Schools district. So basically I got this idea around like spring of 2020. This has been done in multiple other cities, towns, all across the nation. So it's not like I came up with Indigenous Peoples Day. And also, just a quick disclaimer, I'm also not of Indigenous descent. So that's something important to keep in mind. Basically, so I had this idea, and my first step was to contact Mr. Seacott, the high school principal, if you don't know, and kind of talk to him about, why I thought it's important to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. So after a little bit, I didn't get a response from him in a couple weeks, I guess. So I reached out to Needham Diversity Initiative, which is, I guess, kind of like an interest group or an organization around Needham that's dedicated to making diversity initiatives. So I reached out to them, and from there, I went on to go in front of the select board committee. And well, I guess I'll talk about my experience with Needham Diversity Initiative a little more. They were the first group that I talked to about my personal ideas, and this was a very early stage in the process of making the change. And from there, they put me in contact with the select board, which is kind of like Needham's town government. There's a couple people on it that, Needham citizens elect, and then they kind of lead change and, government functions for the town. And so I spoke, and they have like a meeting about every month, I think. Someone can fact check me on that. But I went in front of them, and this was just in the like 15 informal minutes before the meeting actually starts. And I shared my idea. Some select board people, agreed and thought that it was a change that Needham needed. Others did not, because, there's always going to be two sides of it within the Indigenous Peoples Day context. There are a lot of specifically Italian Americans that are against the change as part of like a heritage thing. And then obviously there are people that are in favor of, taking like changing the name of a holiday that celebrates Christopher Columbus, who, if you don't know, was responsible for the genocide of the Taino people. So from there, the select board, it looked like it was going to take a lot of time for the town to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. So after talking with Michelle Chalmers, she led the Wellesley organization that led the change from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. So I had a Zoom call with her, and we just kind of talked about the process in Wellesley, which would obviously look different in Needham, but pretty similar because obviously we're neighboring towns. And the town government is similar in Needham and Wellesley. And so from there, I was just kind of getting ideas about how I could make this a town-wide change. But before that, I thought that it would be a little more beneficial to focus on changes within the Needham Public School District. So I emailed Dr. Gutekanst after speaking with Mr. Seacott. And for the next almost year, from August of 2020 to April of 2021, I consistently met with Dr. Gutekanst and another student who was also interested in making this change. We had to write up a proposal to eventually speak in front of the school committee, which basically makes a lot of decisions and, formulates the calendar for the school year within the Needham Public Schools district. So like I said, me and this other student met several times with Dr. Gutekanst. We had to do a lot of research about, Indigenous Peoples Day, reach out to Indigenous groups, or there's one organization in particular called Indigenous Peoples Day Massachusetts, and kind of, receive guidance from people who have more experience with this change. And eventually, after a bunch of meetings, a lot of research, and just kind of connecting with other people. At one point, we sent out a survey to the Needham High School and Pollard Middle School, asking students and teachers how they would feel about changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And so after, we got all this data, all this information, then me and the student went in front of the school committee, which is a televised event. And we basically proposed why we think Columbus Day should become Indigenous Peoples Day. And well, a couple weeks later in May, the school committee decided unanimously to make the change. So obviously this wasn't a linear process. There were difficulties. We had to switch back and forth and really decide what change we wanted to make. And yeah, that's a little bit about my experiences. And yeah,